Affirmative action. Affirmative action is an action or policy favoring those who tend to suffer from discrimination, especially in relation to employment or education, also called positive discrimination. In simpler terms, colleges will accept minorities to meet a diversity quota. Affirmative action is largely used in many college admissions and is highly debated whether it has positive or negative effects. Affirmative action is an outcome of the 1960s civil rights movement, intended to provide equal opportunities for members of minority groups and women in education and employment. In 1961, President Kennedy was the first to use the term affirmative action. In an executive order that directed government contractors to take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to race, creed, color, or national origin. Affirmative action policies initially focused on improving opportunities for African Americans in employment and education. The Supreme Court's Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954, outlawing school segregation and Civil Rights Act of 1964 improved life prospects for African Americans. In 1965, however, only 5% of undergraduate students, 1% of law students, and 2% of medical students in the country were African American. President Lyndon Johnson, an advocate for affirmative action, signed an executive order in 1965 that required government contractors to use affirmative action policies in their hiring to increase the number of minority employees. Colleges and universities began adopting similar recruitment policies, and over time the enrollment rates of African American and Latino students increased steadily. Despite the efforts that have been made to establish equal opportunity, gaps in college enrollment between minority and white students remain. According to data from the National Center on Education Statistics, in 2007, 70% of white high school graduates immediately enrolled in college, compared to 56% of African American graduates and 61% of Hispanic graduates. The updated report finds that in 2011, 69% of white high school graduates immediately enrolled in college, compared to 65% of African American graduates and 63% of Hispanic graduates.
Supporters of affirmative action. Affirmative action programs have resulted in doubling or tripling the number of minorities' applications to colleges or universities, and have made colleges and universities more representative of their surrounding community. Statistics show that after California abolished its affirmative action program in 1998, the minority student admissions at UC Berkeley fell 61%, and minority admissions at UCLA fell 36%. After Texas abolished its affirmative action program in 1996, Rice University's freshman class had 46% fewer African Americans and 22% fewer Hispanic students. Graduates who benefited from affirmative action programs say that they have received better jobs, earned more money, and ultimately are living better lives because of the opportunity they received. Affirmative action policies are necessary in order to compensate for centuries of racial, social, and economic oppression. Generally, individuals with higher socioeconomic status have more opportunities than those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Supporters believe that certain racial or ethnic groups are disadvantaged because they are frequently in lower income brackets and consequently are not exposed to the same resources as students from higher socioeconomic classes. Advocates support the notion of competition between students based on merit, but argue that affirmative action compensates for economic disparities. Critics of affirmative action. Affirmative action was created to ensure fair admission practices and to rectify a long period of racial discrimination. The policy is outdated, however, and causes a form of reverse discrimination by favoring one group over another based on racial preference rather than academic achievement. Further, there is concern that minority groups may be stigmatized and treated differently by peers and professors who may believe that the success of minority groups in higher education institutions is unearned. Affirmative action policies do not necessarily help economically disadvantaged students. A study by Hoover Institution found that affirmative action tends to benefit middle and upper class minorities. Many opponents believe that diversity in higher education is extremely important, but that affirmative action only serves to amplify racial prejudice. Because there's no correlation between skin color and intelligence, affirmative action programs are unnecessary. Moreover, affirmative action programs are condescending to the underrepresented groups, since it is implied that the groups need affirmative action in order to succeed in higher education. The Catholic Church is for and has endorsed affirmative action. This is because it helps to overcome the weight and history of racism. All humans are created in the image of God, so according to the Church, it would be wrong for the Church to discriminate against a human being based on their race, gender, ethnicity, or social status. The Pontifical Commission for Justice and Peace in 2001 document by Pope John Paul II states that faithful to her values, the Church educates at the service of every person and of the whole person. It goes on to say that all people of whatever race, condition, or age, in virtue of their dignity as human persons, have inalienable right to education. Affirmative action helps for minorities to have a proper education, which the Catholic Church has a firm belief that everyone should have despite the characteristics that make them different from others. The future of affirmative action. Fisher v. University of Texas at Austin reinforces the legitimacy of the diversity rationale for the affirmative action in higher education, and therefore underscores a principle of racial inclusion that has otherwise been absent from the court's equal protection doctrine. In this respect, Fisher too matters because of what it was not, a loss that closed yet another door to opportunity for people of color. The court has yet to uphold diversity policies outside of higher education. And as the minority opinion notes, Fisher II's somewhat unique facts may limit its future application, but some optimism may be justified if we interpret Fisher II to shift equal protection's focus from eliminating affirmative action itself, as the court's pre-Grutter cases suggest, to ensuring the accountability of institutions that practice it.